almost all startups will say this, they index for like slope versus experience, where you take the potential of someone who's hungry, wants to work hard, is more willing to change things in the way they think, versus someone who's been doing it for 15, 20 years. You can't wake up miserable and actually be achieving these targets. Yeah, it's hard work, but at the end of the day, it's like, do you enjoy what you're doing on a daily basis is what pushes through.
Ahmed Shafik is the co-founder of Venn, one of Canada's fastest growing startups and also our banking platform. Venn has nearly 15,000 businesses using their platform.
They've raised more than $25 million and recently launched an incorporation feature inside their platform, along with some accounting automations to help founders better manage their money.
Every episode of Building the North will be an interview with a founder, CEO, or politician who's making a real impact. This is episode 2 with Venn co-founder Ahmed Shafik. How long have you guys been in this office?
We've been here for 3 months now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there a favorite startup in the neighborhood that you like?
Probably us. But
Okay, but anywhere else?
I think there's actually, it's more the restaurants and businesses that you walk around and you see them, they actually use us for banking or finance. And then you're like, oh wow, our customers are just down the street.
You're getting lunch and trying to sell them more.
Exactly. Yeah. But even Snapchat's down the street, and you grew up using their product, and then you see the team down the street. So there's a lot of inspiring companies, a lot of new tech companies coming up. Even like our friends, their friends that work down the street, employees who are here see their coworkers from old companies down the street as well. So it's just like the hub if you want to run into people.
That's sick. That's awesome. Is there one company that you wish would like move into this neighborhood or would move into Toronto?
Well, I mean, all the AI companies are coming now, so I don't know if I wish they're coming because then you compete for talent. But it's nice to see people around. It's nice to see the area being busy, and then just people walking the street. You run into people at coffee shops or just in the neighborhood. It just keeps the buzz alive, and it motivates people. And also, like, we started 2 years ago full on office, and then the neighborhood was a bit dead, and everyone's working remote. And then you go out now for coffee, you're like, oh wow, everyone's back. So it does bring the energy back.
Totally. Well, I've been seeing this. Like, we were co-working this morning, and the amount of people that I knew who just like wandered into that same coffee shop. It's like, this is just the neighborhood for all of
Maybe Toronto's the play. I don't know.
I don't know.
I mean, it might be busy because the World Cup now, but if you came like a few weeks ago, it's still the same thing.
Are you watching the World Cup at all?
Yeah. I mean, we just installed a TV in the office 2 days ago. It was good timing, but yeah, I think a lot of the people here are fans of soccer in general. But everyone's like, even if you're not, they just want to watch Canada and stuff. So.
Yeah.
What about you guys?
I'm not a huge soccer fan. Julian grew up playing forever, and so you're a little bit more married to the sport.
A little bit more married to the sport. I went to see Canada's game on Friday, and then I'll be going to the Switzerland Canada game as well, which is going to be really fun.
Is that Vancouver or here?
Yes. Yeah. So we're in Montreal this weekend, and then in Vancouver next week, which should be good. It'll be fun. I don't know. I feel
very
like
hard to get tickets.
Yeah. It was like just luck of the draw. I think we applied for all of the Canada like home games, and then I applied for like a 36 else or like 36 other tickets, and I got none of them. We only got Canada tickets. But.
My brother did get one in Miami, but he lives there, so maybe easier.
What does he do?
He's also in tech, so he's building an AI marketing company. SEO, AEO, the whole wave. Yep. We're actually customers of theirs.
Makes sense.
Yeah. We message each other all the time.
Yeah. Is he a customer of yours?
Well, they're in the US, so...
Does he sell to Canada at all?
Yeah. No, not yet. Yeah. So I think they might open an office here, so they might open an entity and start...
They're going to incorporate through Venn.
Might need a whole solution through us, so we'll take them through the whole cycle.
Were your parents entrepreneurs too?
No, they were very traditional. So they're doctors. So they went down the path of... we were born in Egypt, and they grew up there. And then for them, it was how do you just get better education, better life for the kids. And then they ended up becoming doctors. They're both psychiatrists. And then we grew up all over the place in the Middle East, moved different countries every few years. We lived in New York for a few years when I was much younger. I don't really remember it that much. I just remember it now going to raise money, but back in the day, I don't really remember it. And then they thought we were going to become doctors or engineers. And then my brother did study engineering. I studied sciences for 1 year, thinking I was going to become a doctor. Yeah. And then after 1 year, I ended up switching to finance. I was like, this is not my path. But now, funny enough, they use us for banking too for their clinic. So it's full circle. But yeah, my whole family are basically doctors.
And what did they think when you took the entrepreneurial path? I guess your brother did too.
Yeah, he started a few companies way before me. So he kind of took the hard route where they didn't really understand yet what we were doing in the beginning. And they're like, why are you taking so much risk and all these things? But over time, they kind of understood, like, you'll figure things out. You're a smart kid. And it's like that time to be risky. Like later on, it's a bit harder. As long as like you're doing it the right way, like they kind of support you from that sense. So, and they were very open to it. I think initially, like not becoming a doctor, that was the big switch in their mind of what is this path? What is finance? How does this actually work? And then going into consulting, they had no idea what we were doing. They're like, why are our companies hiring these young kids to advise them? And then
that's what we feel.
Yeah, honestly. Exactly. Even though you work for like a big corp and you're just a consultant moving around, and then going to startups are like, what does that even mean? You're just trusting some other person to build a company while you're there early on, and then over time they kind of got it. And then now they're super happy. So they kind of understand it now, I think, of what we do. But yeah.
I feel like it's so interesting because Taylor's parents are both entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
My parents, one was a journalist and then a teacher, and the other has a PhD in like very different backgrounds. It's so interesting how that like impacts your choice to become an entrepreneur or not.
Yeah. You almost like all want to try to please them in the beginning, and then at some point you end up finding your path. As long as they're supportive and they're happy, it kind of helps you. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of what you were saying around like deploying these young kids to help companies do things better, we had a client tell us earlier today that we looked like high schoolers. And they're like, how old are these guys actually? And
she tells me on the call, she's like, we've been talking this the day that we did our first intro call with the entire team as like the onboarding thing. She's like, we were talking about you guys after and asking like, are you still in high school? Did you graduate high school? She's like, how long have you been graduated for? And she didn't believe me.
That's crazy. Yeah. Sometimes you just have to look bigger than you are, even externally from like brand, company, website.
But then also, do you want someone old implementing AI in your company? Probably not, right? Exactly. Like you want some young kids.
Exactly. For you guys, it probably helps, right? Yeah.
It does. And I personally, this might be my perspective, but I'd rather have a banking platform that I can speak to and talk to.
Exactly.
I don't know. Like I think quite frankly, it's cool to be able to like have a conversation with our co-founder of a bank.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, even when we first started onboarding our first customers, a lot of them knew us personally because you have to go to friends, you have to go to family. You kind of beg a few people to take risk on you in the beginning, and then over time, you use the logos that you have or customers that you have to look bigger than you are, and then to convince them to build that trust, especially in financial services. And then sometimes you see people do tactics like, let's buy billboard in some area because we want to land an enterprise customer or whatever it is. And then if someone sees a billboard on the highway that driving down the street, they might think you're an enterprise yourself, but they have no idea you're like 7 employees in an office. So you'll see some people do some tactics to look bigger than they are and build that trust and safety, which helps them with the sales cycle. So over time, you kind of use certain things to help you.
Well, it's a tough industry to come into as a startup. Like, how are you supposed to convince these companies to trust you with their capital, right?
Exactly. I think in the beginning, it was almost like you reverse engineer who are the people that are willing to take risk on using a fintech or trying a fintech. And I think initially in the beginning, we always thought like the US is always ahead. Europeans are always ahead when it comes to software, innovation, AI, banking, etc. So initially we actually targeted Canadian founders or Canadian CEOs who used to live in the US, who used to live in Europe, because they had that mindset of like, why is Canada so behind? I want a solution that I used to use in the US or I'm used to Europe on a daily basis. And then they come here, they're using more legacy software, legacy banks. So that was actually a bit easier for us, where you target the folks that are looking for these solutions. If you go to people who, one, you have no customers yet, are more traditional and want to see brand building, safety, and trust is a huge thing, which Canadians typically are quite more conservative, it's an uphill battle. So you kind of pick and choose initially who you want to target, and then it helps you expand over time.
It's interesting that trust is like such an important part of the process. I know for me, I was banking with RBC for a long time, and I actually had them charge me or try to charge me $40 to access my own statements. And I was so confused. I was like, this is my account. Why do you need to charge me?
And it's digital too.
To like pay for their back office to go and get this. And it's like, I don't really understand why this industry hasn't been disrupted sooner. It doesn't really make sense.
It's taken a while. And even initially there's a few other players doing the consumer side first, right? And it took them like 5-ish years to even start making some dent in the market. And then because trust and safety takes so long to build in the Canadian market, and then now on the business side, we launched in 2023 and we're like now year 3.5. And then now we're starting to see that word of mouth or the referral flywheel effect because the trust is starting to build and the brand's starting to build. But typically in other markets like the US or UK or Europe in general, you can see a fintech launch and then within 2 weeks, there's actually like a mass adoption of a flywheel effect there. So it's different dynamics of like consumers here and just general mindset. And what you're used to for so long. Like you grow up using the same bank and platform that you've been using for the last 25, 30 years, right? And it's kind of ingrained in your brain. There's no other alternative. But funny enough, that story, it happened to us early on when you were using one of the big five. And then my co-founder messaged me, was like, what are all these charges? Who's viewing these statements? And then I realized it was actually me. I was like, I keep downloading statements. And then I didn't realize you get charged per view or per download.
Which is crazy. What a concept that is. Take us back, like why Venn? What was the whole process to start? Obviously, the name change over the past little while. Like, take us back to that very beginning and why come into this space and why in Canada? Because there aren't a ton of companies in this space in Canada, right? Everyone thinks they need to go into the US to build a fintech platform.
Yeah, for sure. It all goes back to like me and my co-founders' backgrounds. We worked at European fintechs, so we worked at a company called Revolut for a long time. And we were part of the expansion team, so we kind of helped launch their products that really went well in Europe across different markets in North America, Asia, etc. And then we always looked back at our home country or where we live, and we saw how behind it is. And similarly in Europe, or even in the UK, you're walking down the street, you see how people are addicted to their apps on the fintech side. Why do they enjoy it so much? How come they actually like to use it? Versus you come back here, it's almost the complete opposite reaction when you have to do something related to financial activity, right? It's almost like a burden. And then we're like, why has this been changed in decades, right? And then obviously on the consumer side, there's some things that have been happening in a good way with other players. We thought the business side was a bigger opportunity given it hasn't been touched, but also just the friction that they have to face on a daily basis. You just even keep their day-to-day running, because consumers, you have a day-to-day job, but this is their livelihood, just to keep the business running. Our parents are both SMBs. That we know who they deal with on a daily basis, the fees they have to pay, the friction points. And we thought, given we've already done this in a few other markets, why not come back home and actually try to make a difference here? So a lot of it was what we were exposed to, and then coming back home to try to actually build it here.
Was there ever a thought of leaving or going somewhere else?
No, it was always, do you continue building for these other great companies in another country or come back home to do it? I think it was more, what is going to be the actual thing that you want to build here? Is it finance? Is it related to payments? Or is it something else? I think I always had it in me that at some point I will build something. I didn't, like if you asked me 10 years ago, I don't know if I would have said payments or fintech, but it's where I ended up landing in Europe. And then it just, I got hooked on how you can actually make a change in like people's daily lives. And then it just was a big opportunity here. There are other markets similar to Canada that have this structure of like both the consumer, but also the kind of oligopoly around the banks. But for us, it was always like, this is our home country. Let's try to make a difference here.
How much credit do you give Wealthsimple and others, both from like a regulatory shift, but also consumer sentiment? Like I feel like they were one of the first to kind of make that switch in the country, where now it seems like second nature for us to just log on to a platform like that. Yeah. How much credit would you give them and others?
No, for sure. Like, I mean, Wealthsimple, Neo, Coho. My co-founder was actually an early employee at Coho. I think he was employee like 5 or 6 when they were in Airbnb back in the day. So they've made the wave on the consumer side where over time they started to shift people's default behavior of I need to open X account, or I need to send money to this person or my friend, or I want to split the bill. Let me use a traditional app. You kind of default now to let me use the fintech, right? So they for sure made a huge wave or even dent in the market from both the behavior of the consumer, but also to build that brand and trust where fintechs can actually compete with the traditional banks, right? So for sure, they've done a huge headwind and helped a lot. And then obviously there's more opportunities that you can solve. But there's also other industries that you look at, like legal, for example, more traditional software. And then there's all these AI companies are starting to actually make it a lot easier for lawyers to do their daily workflows. But lawyers traditionally would have never trusted some of these platforms. But over time, the behavior changes. And then that actually ends up translating to people using us because they've figured it out on their daily workflow and on their daily basis at their legal firm, and they're like, why can't I do this for my finance, right? So it ends up actually helping from multiple point of views, not just like the consumer side. So that has helped a lot across the board.
Yeah, I feel like for so long, we almost as like Canadians, we've been expecting or like dealing with these same really like intensely regulated, stiff industries in all of these different spaces. And it's like the Overton window has shifted a little bit where now it's like we can expect better. We can expect something that's more usable and better to experience. Yeah. I'm curious, like you mentioned on the trust side, you mentioned business banking hadn't been touched. Is there a specific reason that you think business banking was kind of like the business banking was kind of the last stone to fall, the last hurdle?
I think a lot of it, even just fintech in general in Canada, has to do with a lot of the infrastructure and the access to building innovative banking infrastructure to actually build your product on top. I think in the US there's a great model where there's actually fintechs that have built infrastructure for other fintechs or banking platforms to actually build their app. Here in Canada, a lot of it is you actually have to build the infrastructure first and then build your platform on top of it. So it's almost, you have to spend a few years just before you're even able to get your first customer. So a lot of it has to do with the infrastructure access. And then it's pretty black or white here when it comes to the licenses and regulatory regime. It has changed in the last few years in a good way for fintechs to get more access to rails and just the regulatory landscape being open to new entrants. But even it's almost black or white here. You're either a bank or you're not. And if you're not a bank, you have to either partner with a bank for majority of products. There are some things that you can build yourself. But it is pretty difficult to actually build something like that we've built in Canada. In the US, Europe, there's different licenses, there's different partners. There's actually a lot of partners you can actually build different products with in just even a few months. Like you don't actually have to spend years building infrastructure, which is almost non-existent here. So I think that's part of why it's taken so long. Consumer versus business, I think it could have gone either way. I think it's just consumer is much easier to change because it's not their daily operating system. It's something that's like a secondary to what they have to do on a daily basis or even weekly or monthly. But a business to trust you with their finances day one, it's almost like they need to run their business on you. So it takes a lot more time to convince them. So it's almost like they have to first shift their personal life and then be okay with it there. And then it's almost like now, okay, my business can actually shift and innovate. But it probably could have gone either way.
Talk to me about the fundraising process. You guys just raised your Series A, $21.5 million. Congratulations on that.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
What was that process like? And raising money in Canada is a whole different scene, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think I can even go back to when we first raised. Given the infrastructure doesn't exist, we had to raise money before we even had a product. So a lot of it we ended up going to the US to raise some money there. That was our initial pre-seed round to be able to build the infrastructure and fund the business. Some companies, obviously, you don't need to raise, you can bootstrap it given it's low cost initially to start. But essentially, this has happened in the US already. So US investors have been exposed to this type of product actually working in that market. So it was a lot easier for them to actually be open to now dominating and innovating in another sector or market. So that process was pretty smooth from that sense. But a lot of it now, back then, they just trust the team, right? We basically had a pitch deck and just me and Saud just going to pitch investors on this dream, right? So a lot of it was about, we've done this before with a few other companies. We've done this in other markets. Now we're going to go back home and actually do it in Canada. And then recently, a lot of it now is about traction and the customers we've been able to land, the product we've been able to build with a great team that we've been able to add over the past few years. And then now it's more about the numbers. What have you been able to do over the last few years from that first round? And it's not about the team as much anymore. It's more you have to prove yourself. And then similarly with future rounds. How it came about is actually quite cool. We've been talking to the lead investor, Left Lane, for a while. I've been meeting them in New York for about a few years before we even took $1 from them. And then over time, you kind of build that relationship. You trust them, they trust you. They understand the market, they understand the business. Versus like you do hear some fundraisers, and I actually have friends who've done this where like in 2 weeks you meet the investor on a Monday, a week and a half later they wire you the money, and you're kind of in business together. But for me, it was, if we're taking a large amount of money, we're going to be in business together for a very long time. You kind of want to get to know who's going to be on your board, who you're going to kind of battle with, who's going to push you, and then who do you want to lean on for support over time whenever those times are. And they're always there to help whenever needed, but also they understand fintech, right? So you don't want an investor who generally is just going to give you money and just walk away. If you want to launch a product that you kind of want some expertise in, not to say that's the way you should go, is like go lean on investors at all times to launch a product, but sometimes they connect you with someone who's done this already in like Colombia or Nigeria or whatever the country is, to learn from. So they were very helpful. And then when we actually wanted to raise, it was a very smooth process. I think it was like 2-3 weeks. We ended up doing our Series A, but we knew them for a while before it actually happened. So that was a very smooth process from that sense.
You mentioned raising from American investors versus Canadian investors at different points.
Yeah.
How would you compare the two?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of Canadian investors who actually used to work in the U.S. So behaviorally and in terms of like being aggressive with capital, it's almost always the same. I think part of it is them taking bets on sectors that haven't been innovated on. U.S. investors are typically willing to take on more risk. Like initially, we actually went to seek out more Canadian investors than U.S. investors. Just happened to be the round came together faster, and then the U.S. investors leaned in there. But even our last round, we added Intact Insurance as one of the investors as well. But we always try to default to how can we involve Canadians and how can we lean on there. It's just access to capital. There's more capital in the U.S. The speed of some investors are much faster in the U.S. But for us, like Canadian investors know Canada way better than U.S. investors, right? Even U.S. investors are aware. In the beginning, they're like, are you sure you don't want Canadian investors across the table? Which we ended up adding anyways. But generally, they've seen this play multiple times over in the U.S. and they're willing to take on a bit more risk. But we've talked to Canadian investors who used to work for great U.S. funds, and they kind of almost operate the same. It's just the pool of capital is much larger there, so they're willing to take on more shots on goal.
I mean, I've got to ask, when you raised the 21.5, did you put it inside a Venn account?
Yeah. So like we actually, when we shared our bank details, we actually sent them like a Venn PDF. And we're going to receive our money there. Initially, we couldn't do that because we didn't even have a product. Right. But now, yes, all our money is with our own product. So we hold our funds. We use like corporate cards, expense management, AP, AR, everything. We even, like when you guys pay for the plan, we invoice you through our own product as well. So we kind of built the whole system inside of our own platform. We don't even, we try to maximize the use of it. And even our finance team now gives us feedback because they have to use our product on a daily basis. That's true. So we almost build for our own team as well. Yeah. And then employees with the app, expense management, to take pictures of receipts, workflows. But yeah, it was kind of cool to send them a PDF of our own product, and they're like, this is what you're funding because we're going to receive money in it anyways. So it was a kind of a full circle for even our own product.
You get that feedback loop.
Yeah, exactly.
Was there a feature, or is there a feature that everyone on your team loves? Like, what's the favorite feature?
I think recently everyone's been waiting for the mobile app, and then once we went into beta or internal testing, I think 2 months ago, and then everyone downloaded it within literally 30 seconds of that Slack message of here's the link. So everyone's been nonstop using the app, leaving feedback, and almost addicted to it because obviously the different teams use the app differently. But that's been a big hit internally of who uses Android, who uses iOS, what features are we getting. They're waiting for more releases, and then they invite their friends. They tell people across the board, but the app has been a long time coming, and they're super excited about it.
Is it live now?
Yeah. So we launched the iOS app last week, and then Android is launching next week. But we haven't actually announced it publicly. Okay, right. But in a few weeks we will. So we'll do a full public announcement in a few weeks. But yeah, we'll give you guys early access if you haven't gotten the email. So
we haven't.
Yeah,
we're excited.
Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah, I mean, one of the pain points that we've felt over that, and I'm sure your team's working on this and talking about this as well, is we received a check and couldn't deposit it. So we've had to set up a Wealthsimple business account to do some of those things and then transfer back and forth.
Yeah.
Is that coming?
Yeah, for sure. That's why part of the reason we built the app is to actually allow the full functionality across the full suite. So check deposits are coming. And more functionality will actually be more on mobile, sometimes not even available on web, like check deposits will be available on mobile versus web, but for sure, like the whole functionality is on the table. And we'll keep expanding both horizontally and vertically across the board.
That's super cool. I mean, I know I'm excited for like more AI in banking.
Yeah.
What's your like long-term vision of
For sure.
say like in 5 years, in 10 years, what does the Venn product look like?
Yeah, I think it's even for us, we just build for customers, right? So even we might have our own vision of what it might be. Typically how we build is what do the customers want, what pain points do they have, and how can we solve it the best way. Obviously, there is some percentage of it you kind of introduce products that they don't even know that they want yet. Part of it is AI, and people kind of don't think about banking, finance, and AI all in one circle. We kind of have it split where some customers are almost like leave it alone. I'm so used to regular banking. I don't want AI to get involved. I'm scared. And then we have the full other side where like I want to minimize my time in Venn. I just want to be able to use Claude or use a CLI or whatever it is and just interact with that. And then it talks to Venn by itself. I don't even want to log in, right? So we have the two extremes of who do you actually build for. Obviously, there's like a middle ground between, but you've kind of seen it like how do we make the workflows across the board a lot more efficient and save time for accountants, bookkeepers, employees, approvers across the platform. So with like accounting, for example, is how do you automate the bookkeeping process? And how do you do suggestions for GL codes? How do you chase employees for receipts? How do you extract tax rates? All these things, you don't actually have to do it. It's mundane tasks. And that's where we can introduce AI to make life a bit easier. But in a few months, people are not going to be talking to Claude to move thousands and millions of dollars across the board. Maybe in 5 to 10 years, that is the new reality.
When the agents are moving the money.
Exactly. And we see it already in some markets where some agents are just like creating cards and paying to buy shoes for the person or whatever it is. So consumers typically somewhat more ahead on the business side compared to business banking. But you have the two extremes of like very traditional folks who are like just migrated from a legacy software provider or a banking provider to a fintech. And then now you have the extreme of like they were already much more ahead than your average, and they want to go full extreme on the AI side where minimize time inside of software. I want to automate almost my daily life.
I know I'm excited for that.
Yeah.
I can't wait to
I know what group you guys are in. So,
yeah.
I'm curious. I want to come back to the Wealthsimple thing. They recently came out with a business banking account. Yeah. Does that feel like a retaliation to the kind of movement that you've been making in the market, or the team's been making in the market, or what is that decision for them? Are they starting to see the opportunity because of the path that you've carved?
For sure. I think to me, it's always about the opportunity in the market. It's always been known that business banking hasn't been touched in a very long time, and it's pretty obvious that more and more players are going to go into this space. I think typically what you'll find is consumers and businesses want one platform to manage everything. And I think that's where the world's going across, not just even fintech or finance. It's going to go across all different verticals. How do you consolidate things? Because they want to minimize time and be more efficient. So we've seen it across the board, and we know it's going to happen where both the personal side and the business side might need to live in one place. So it was very expected that many different players, and to me that's good. Like it pushes people to innovate. It pushes consumers to actually expect more and more from the fintechs, and it pushes the teams to launch things faster. So it's always healthy competition from that side, but it's always like where's the opportunity, and then how do we solve it for our customer?
Is there a reason why you think competition, all right, I'll rephrase this. I think, how do you think competition could be good for the average Canadian and like improving that banking experience? How does that kind of trickle down to the average business owner or the average Canadian?
Yeah, I think for them, it's more choices, right? So if there's more competition, there's more options on the table, and then they get to choose what's actually best for their business. Some players might actually solve it better for e-com businesses. Some might solve it for startups. Some might solve it for plumbing or traditional, let's say, HVAC businesses. So at some points, there are some nuances between different verticals. So they get to actually pick what's best suited for the business, which is at the end of the day, it's the best thing for consumers. So more competitions equal more option. And then at that point, it actually flips it back to the companies. If they have choices, how do you actually build the best platform to make it you are the best without even a question, right? So it kind of goes back and forth, the dynamic where consumer gets the benefit at the end of the day, but also pushes the fintechs to actually build better product to make sure that the person doesn't actually switch from the platform.
You would love more competition. More options, drives prices down.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that it's taken hundreds of years to get to the stage that it has around competition in the business banking sector, I don't know. I mean, even when I look at how AI features are coming into this industry, and I'm personally excited to just see more. I mean, I know we talked about like where we want to be. Curious how you see that kind of messaging around AI being integrated into banking and the efficiency gains that come with that. How do you think that could be expressed to the average Canadian?
Yeah, for us, what we found is you have to tell the story, right? You have to kind of explain the impact of the problem you're trying to solve, and then they actually have to see the impact. So how do you introduce it in a way across the actual workflow where you're almost giving them step by step versus you're changing their workflow overnight? So it's almost you introduce it in piecemeal versus they log in one day and they're just talking to a chatbot and they can't even see their account anymore, right? So we've actually seen some players go full direction to flip into the chatbot interface, and that's kind of the default now. But generally, it's like, how do you actually make it more valuable for them over time? And then as they find more value, they're going to actually want to shift their behavior to that thing. But nobody's going to wake up just because they use GPT or Claude to actually want to use that across all their vertical softwares. They want to actually understand, what does the value come from and what does it bring? And then if it does, then I'll change my workflow. So typically for us, we break it down. Where does the most value where can we provide the most value? And accounting is one example. And how do we make that process easier? And then we kind of now drag it across the entire product, where what workflows are next, where some people are facing mundane tasks, repetitive tasks. Those are typically the easiest to solve and convince consumers and businesses to actually switch. So once you find the value, they'll change their mindset a little bit.
And are you building then towards an exit? Could you see yourself selling to one of those big 5 banks if they wanted to acquire you?
I think for us, it was always just put your head down, solve hard problems, and build as big of a company as you can, right? So for us, it was never about, let's build this company with the hopes that we exit at one day. For us, we're enjoying it. It's always been a dream to build something like this, but also on a daily basis, you're solving and you're seeing the change to now we have almost 15,000 companies are using the platform, and you get feedback on a daily basis. It's almost like adrenaline every day. And the cycle has been unreal. And then also building the team and seeing who wants to even join the company to actually build and solve this mission for us. So for us, it's always been focused on solving the problem and building as big of a business as we can, but also solve the mission that we wanted, where how can we make finance easier for every business?
I feel like we do this too, where it's like you set a goal, you hit that goal, you blow past it, and you're like, how do you then set a new target?
Exactly.
Or even like celebrate your wins in a way that, I don't know, it feels like often your goalposts move when you set targets.
Exactly. Even for us, like even fundraising was never a goal. It was even like when we raised our Series A, it was almost like an hour later, me and Saad had a call. We're like, what's next? Like, what's our target now for Q1, Q2, Q3? Obviously, we had some vision as we raised. We need to do this, and this is how we're going to deploy the capital. But sometimes you almost forget to celebrate the wins as well, where you launched X product, you launched X feature, and typically your mindset is like, okay, what's next? What's the next goalpost? So it always moves in an aggressive direction, and then you obviously get the team buy-in, get the team to push towards that direction as well. But obviously, you need to celebrate the wins along the way to actually enjoy it as well.
I feel like we hear really often from founders who are like early on in that stage, and they're always looking for feedback, or they're looking for advice from people who have done it or kind of taken that journey, set those targets, hit those targets. You had one piece of advice that you would give to like your younger self or another founder who's like just setting out on this path in a new industry, what would you say?
I think just in terms of goals and targets is always be more aggressive than you think. You'll be very surprised how far you can go. And this kind of trickles down to the team as well. So even when you're setting goals to the team, setting the goals to different individuals is always whatever you think the target is, you kind of add like 25 to 50% to it, and you'll get there. So it's almost you have to believe how far you can go and then add some percentage to it, because you don't actually see it until it happens. We even set some targets for like the growth team. They were almost shocked in the beginning of the quarter, like, how's this the target? And they actually surpassed the target after 3 months. And they're like, then we do it again. And it's almost like they push it now, where they're setting aggressive targets themselves. So it ends up flipping the script. But for me, it's always like, even giving advice to founders, to do this well, you have to do something you're passionate about at the end of the day. Like, you can't wake up miserable and actually be achieving these targets. It's hard work. You're gonna bang your head against the wall many different days. Some days are terrible, some days are amazing. It's a roller coaster. But at the end of the day, it's like, do you enjoy what you're doing on a daily basis? Is what pushes through.
Something that's top of mind for us right now as we continue to scale is creating that internal company culture as an organization where people, like you said, are setting targets and goals and like smashing them, and everyone's happy to be here and do like contribute to this mission. How have you been so successful in developing and fostering that culture internally?
For sure. I think at different stages, there was different ways to do it. Initially, your first 5 to 10 people that come in almost have to follow the exact same mindset and culture that you follow, right? So you have to be very careful and be very selective on who the first few employees are. So the first few hires we made, either we've worked with them in the past, they came from companies we used to work, and they almost embodied the same culture and mindset that we had. So as you grow, those people will kind of become the branches of the company where they actually push that culture, right? It almost, yes, it can come top down, but you almost don't want it that way forever, because you want the actual people to be empowered to push that culture. The second piece is we're very open and transparent during interviews. So we always, even in the first interview process, even our employees who are involved in interviews with other hires, we tell them be as transparent as possible and tell people what it's actually like to work here and what your expectations are. On the flip side, we also sell the dream, because obviously there is a big opportunity for you to grow in early stage companies, but you want obviously the person to understand what they're signing up for, to set them up for success, where a few weeks in they join, they're like, what did I sign up for? This is not what I was expecting. So being as transparent as possible to set expectations early on, and then as they join, making sure the 30, 60, 90-day plan is quite concrete. And then after that, you want self-guided people to kind of push and embody the culture and push themselves, versus you want to handhold someone forever. Because if you're handholding people for a very long time, it might not be the right hire early on. Later on, obviously, like you hire more junior people, etc. There's more training, there's more time to actually grow people's career. But early on, it's almost like you have to hire people who are self-guided folks, and then they kind of run with it. So early on, it's a pretty big decision who the first few employees are.
We're having fun with that.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned telling people in interviews like what it's like to work at Venn. What is it like to work at Venn? What does that mean?
I think for us here, we hire people not to optimize things, it's to actually make a big difference, right? So it's a high impact, high ownership, high accountability culture. And then at the same time, it's high trust, high autonomy. So we want to hire people who have a high degree of autonomy, where they want to actually take something and build it and grow it over time, not just move on to the next thing. So it's almost like I usually even ask, it's like, do you want to build your own company in the interview? And that's a good sign for me, because at some point, yes, you can come here for a few years, but if you actually want to build your own thing, that's actually a sign of being an entrepreneur, and you actually want you have that self-motivation to push yourself, right? So for us, it's more that we kind of almost throw people in the deep end, and it's for you to grow this thing. And almost all the products are like someone here built it. It's like their baby, right? And then they get to grow it, and then they get to see the impact. So that's kind of what it's like to actually work here. On the flip side is everyone's super supportive, super collaborative. If someone's facing something that they need help with, like we're one team, and that's how we win. So when it comes like a data problem, an analysis problem, like something related to go to market, you just go to people's desk, tap their shoulder, and that's why we work in person as well. It's just the collaboration. It's just a lot better and faster. So the support's always there whenever needed. But at the same time, you are here to actually make a big difference, versus you're here to optimize a small percentage of a small KPI, right?
You talked about hiring entrepreneurs, and I feel like this is something that Taylor and I deal with really like constantly, where we feel like we get like, it sounds really like egotistical to say, we get like unsolicited job offers. Basically like every time we step outside, which is very flattering.
Or LinkedIn DMs constantly of like, hey, can we come work for you?
Or people like saying, come work for us. It's, what do you think is it about entrepreneurs? I guess there's a two-part question, so I'll restate it as a whole. I feel like so many young people don't realize why entrepreneurs are this like entity that people want to hire. And I feel like we're always saying, oh, if you're having a hard time finding a job in your space, just go build something, show your initiative, show that you will have an impact, will own something. How do you look at that? Why entrepreneurs? What's that like entrepreneurial spirit that you look for?
Yeah, it's almost like you said it, right? It's the initiative that you come in. It's almost like you come into the office. There's that initiative of like, hey, I found this problem. This is how I solve it, and this is the impact that it's going to make. Versus the flip side, if it's not that, you're the manager, whoever it is, actually has to find the problem, pass it off to someone, make sure it's being solved, and then make sure we're tracking it. But it's the entrepreneur kind of flips it on its head, where like they actually build their own roadmap in the company, where you almost like don't actually need to manage them. It's almost like they run their own mini startup within the company as well. And it's almost like we got this from other companies that we worked at, and we took what was successful there and brought it here, where it's like you almost operate these mini founders within a company, and each of them own different areas, and they come to you, hey, this is the roadmap, this is what I'm fixing, this is what I'm building, these are what's going to change and how it's going to impact revenue or monthly active users or whatever. Are you okay with it, not okay with it? Let's move on, versus you have to think about everything in the company yourself and you have to pass it off to someone, manage someone. They flip the script where like they actually bring you the problem and the solution and how they're going to track it on a weekly or daily basis.
But are you worried they might come to the organization for 12 months and then go and start their own thing?
You can do a lot in 12 months at a startup. So for me, it's ideally the company, both the culture, but the work and the impact, it fosters people to stay much longer than that, right? So it's almost like when you want to bring on someone, it's how do you match their skills to a problem they want to solve, and then over time you need to keep them excited about the company, but also about the problems that they're solving and are they growing. If someone typically leaves within like 6 to 12 months, but they're a great person, is they're not being challenged enough. The last company we used to work for, there was now amazing people that have left and started many companies. Some have raised 50 million. Some are now even at a couple 100 million ARR type companies who they've just built in a few years, but they stayed at the previous company for like 1 to 7 years. So it was a wide spectrum. And the people who have stayed there the longest, they were always being challenged. They were always moving up in the company. They were always getting a bigger mandate and bigger scope, where you wake up, it kind of keeps your brain ticking. At some point when you kind of plateau, that's when you start to think about leaving. So as long as they're not plateauing, they typically stay longer. But there are people who are just so eager to start their own thing. And then at the end of the day, it's like whatever is best for that person, right? We've had people who were here for a year or 2 years, and then they actually couldn't solve the goal that they wanted here. And we helped them either find their next thing, or like we actually support them to like go start your own company. Because to me, I'd rather have you be happy than be sad here, right? So for us, is how do we match the right skill set, the right goals with the right problem, even ideally before you even hire them, just to make sure that the things align. Because obviously, like if you bring someone on, they might be great, but then in 6 to 12 months, you have to rehire, which now it's both time, money, and then you have to find the person as well.
Yeah. I want to tie this back to banking, because I think this is I think we could all agree that entrepreneurship is something that Canada needs to incentivize. We need to figure out how to get far more entrepreneurs in Canada. Do you think, what role do you think banking has to play in creating more entrepreneurs in Canada?
I think for us, or just the platform that we build, it's about the support and operating your business and making it easier. And that's why we launched the incorporation product, right? So it's almost like when you have an idea, the process is so simple, from both incorporating to operating your business, that you should take that leap and actually start the company and actually try to create an idea. I think generally it becomes like who's around you, who are the people, what area are you in, and that mindset needs to shift from other different angles as well. But then part of the puzzle is how do you operate the business, how do you manage finances, how do you even start a business? If you make that as simple as possible and take that part out of the equation, then that just shortens the cycle of more entrepreneurs, right? So for us is how do you make that much easier and simpler to push entrepreneurs to actually start a business, and then also support them as they grow, not just the initial cycle. So from incorporation all the way to growing your company to hundreds of millions in revenue, how do we support you throughout the whole cycle?
If you weren't building Venn, what would you be doing?
It's a great question. People ask me all the time, even here at the office. Yeah. I think probably honestly work at a coffee shop or something. To me, there's so much outside of obviously building Venn that you're excited by and you're just passionate about. But I think at some point it's probably starting another company or building in some space. I don't know what that space would be, but I do love restaurants. I do love coffee. Maybe one day at some point we'll have Venn Cafe or something. We're actually talking about it where people who might get Venn metal cards, do we build a cafe for them, get access on Spadina here.
How much do you have to have for a metal card?
I mean, we're still building it, so maybe we'll ideate with you guys on how to build it. But for me, it's always how do you just solve hard problems? It's what keeps my brain going. How do you make big impact? I think obviously if it wasn't Venn, it would be something else. I haven't even thought about a space other than banking or finance in a very long time. But I'm sure it would have been starting some other company to solve some other hard problem.
Well, maybe we'll see the newest 24/7 cafe. I know there's a 24/7 builder cafe in San Francisco run by an insurance company. Could we get one of those here in Toronto.
I need it myself. So yeah,
that might be the incentive I need to come to Toronto.
We'll help you move.
There we go.
I mean, sometimes I come to the office early and there's no coffee around, so I have to obviously use some of the Nespresso pods, but yeah, we do need some 24/7 coffee shops around.
No, I'm just planning to see it. Yeah. I like the idea.
Yeah.
You talked about things outside of Ben that get you excited. What are those things? Like what outside of work do you look forward to? Do you enjoy?
Yeah.
What does that look like?
Oh, I think now, we're in the summer now, so I cycle a lot on the weekends. So I got into that because of COVID. I think like a lot of people got into cycling or tennis or whatever the sport is because of COVID. So whatever good weather we can get on the weekend, it's usually a long day of cycling. Sometimes even some people at work, we get together to go cycle to Port Credit or Hamilton or whatever it is. So that's what usually is, see family, see friends, catch up. Obviously the World Cup is going on now. So whatever games are on, we usually try to watch. But a lot of it is like when you're so deep in the company and you're just thinking about it 24/7, is like sometimes it's good to unplug for a few hours. But you do think about it's like, okay, well, what's the next product or some ideas just randomly come. But as you relax, you do some sports or whatever you actually like. Sometimes you come up with a new idea of how to solve something you've been facing. So it's always, it always comes up in your mind, but I try to obviously like be active, stay busy from that side of things, make sure you're keeping up with family and friends and things like that.
Talk to us about your co-founder relationship with Saad. Obviously, people say co-founder and being business partners is like a marriage.
Yeah.
How have you guys kind of handled that whole process and ensure that things are moving in the direction that you want to at any given time?
No, for sure. I mean, we've known each other for a very long, almost 10 years now. So we met, I think it was 2017 or 2018. So we met a while ago. Yeah. So he joined a few months before me, and then he was part of the interview process when I joined. And then when I flew to London to start there, we had like our first dinner together, just me and him. And then that's when we kind of hit it off. And then obviously over the initial few months at Revolut, we were kind of obviously looking at the expansion into North America and a few countries here. And then we kind of built the business together, and we got very close. We had complementary skills from day one, and we kind of obviously respected each other. We knew what each other could achieve. And then we ended up spending, I think, 3 years there together in different products, different teams. I ended up working in another team towards the end, and he worked on another team. And then we actually ended up finding ourselves at another company together where he joined, and then I ended up joining the same company as well a few weeks after him. And then a few months in, I kind of always knew I was going to end up starting something, and he was the first person that came to my mind when I just have ideas of who should I ideate this with and think about of how do we actually build this and who's the best actually partner to join me on this. So it wasn't even a question of like, is there anyone else? It was always like the default, just because we spent so much time together in this space, but also the skills, we kind of complement each other from that sense. And it's almost like it's like no BS relationship, right? We hold each other accountable when things are going wrong. We tell each other when things are going well. We remind each other to obviously celebrate and things like that. But to be in this together, it's you have to be as transparent as possible. And you see each other more than you even see your family and friends, right? So they're almost like living together. So some things are going to annoy you. Some things you're going to be happy about. So you're almost like, it's like your brother or sister that are much closer in age, and you kind of butt heads here and there, but it's like that's going to happen if you're spending 10 years with someone. So
10 years.
Yeah.
My goodness.
That's going to be you guys soon. So.
I wanted to double click on that because you talked about like what you guys were doing when you were founding the company, how close you've gotten. What do you think one untraditional thing that you've done when you've been running Ben has been?
I think for us initially is it's like us spending time one-on-one together, even as we hire employees, right? So for us, how do you keep that going? How do you make sure that doesn't fade away? Because some weeks you realize, oh shit, we actually haven't spent that much time together because you're so embedded in running different teams, and it kind of gets away from you. But how do you remind yourself, let's on a weekly basis, like go have that dinner together that we used to do, or whatever it is, or let's have 1 hour, 2 hours each day, or even on a weekly basis, just to whiteboard. So you almost have to remind yourself so it doesn't get away from you of like what it was actually like, but also you challenge each other in different ways that some of the people around the team don't, right? And then you hold each other accountable. You kind of push each other from that sense. I think something untraditional that we've done, I don't think we have any like quirks or anything like that that we've done differently. I think for us it's just how do you obviously keep it going in terms of making sure alignment is there, keep the team going, the culture. We both see eye to eye on all the things that we're doing. Some things we're obviously going to challenge each other, but at the end of the day, is like we kind of align to the same goal and what's the North Star. So it's always keeping that going. And how do you do it? It's different formats depending what the stage of the company is. Sometimes we just have to literally meet in this room. Sometimes we have to go to a coffee shop or whatever it is to switch it up. But yeah, it's typically like, how do you make sure the relationship is obviously still there and you're still transparent and honest with each other, and obviously how do you change and fix things over time.
What about on the growth side? What are some like crazy out there things that you wouldn't have expected you'd try to do to grow Venn that you've been experimenting with or trying to play around with to get more users?
I think, again, like every stage it was different. Like early on, I remember I built these like random FX calculators online to try to get traffic to the website and try to figure out what people are searching for. And then they end up landing on a Venn calculator, and then they're like, oh, what is this calculator? And they realize we do FX. This was like obviously like in the first few months when we first launched. So it's like you kind of hack things around. Obviously being in like random Facebook groups of communities that you think are good ICPs, and you're just spending times in Discord channels and to like be in e-commerce groups or whatever it is. So early on it was like, how do you brute force or get that first 100 customers, first 500, and then compounds to 1,000. So obviously like that might work up to a certain point and you have to diversify. But typically it's like you end up finding different hacky things over time that end up working. Even like, even till this day, like we're finding things that actually like we can automate in terms of growth. Like obviously now you think about Mass, we have 15,000 companies that use us. You can talk about referrals, word of mouth. How do you incentivize partnerships? How do you actually grow through AEO, SEO? Even on the AEO wave, we have Alex on the growth side. He was experimenting with AEO for a long time before it even took off, obviously with the first initial iteration of GPT, et cetera. So initially we kind of take big bets on what is the next thing or what is the next wave, and make experiments and iterate over time. And it could seem very hacky in the beginning and very stupid sometimes, but then over time you're like, okay, this is going to add some percentage to that total signups. And then these cohorts will end up knowing about us, and then it compounds easier. But I never thought I was going to be in a Discord chat with different e-commerce groups, et cetera, to actually convince them to join. But they were like a great user base for us.
And did it work?
Yeah, it worked. Yeah, we had hundreds of customers come from it.
Wow.
Yeah. And then we did partnerships with different groups and things like that. But initially it was like 2, 3, and then they talk about it, and then they convince whoever the moderator is to allow us to even continue the discussions. So you do a lot of different things that you don't realize that actually works. We've walked around, put flyers under different offices or whatever it is. You end up sending gifts to different offices to hope that they call you back. So you even cold calling for a long time in the beginning to try to convince businesses to book a demo or whatever it is. So you do whatever is needed in the beginning to get a business on the phone. And then over time you realize, okay, sometimes it's unscalable, sometimes it is. And then how do you make it a systemized thing that actually scales with people?
How effective was cold calling? I'm really
It's very effective. We're still doing it till this day.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, I was expecting that to not be an effective method.
That was
Like
the
someone calls you
process.
up.
But it depends on the industry, right? Like for example, like construction, where people think it's like ads, LinkedIn, whatever. Typically, what B2B SaaS companies do, but construction people are always on the job. They're always on the go. They're not going to be checking LinkedIn ads, or they're not going to be on their emails all the time, or whatever it is. They're mostly on the phone and text messages. So it's different ways to target different verticals. But also, like if you're targeting startups, you're not going to cold call founders, right? Like I get calls all time, but now my phone's permanently on do not disturb. So you're like almost never going to get through to me. And I actually do see some like enterprise companies calling me, and I was like, you're actually doing it, but good for them. Like it might work, right? But it really depends on the vertical you're trying to target and how do you get to them. But you think of it as like, where do they actually live? Like what channels are they using? Sometimes Facebook groups are actually better for them than LinkedIn ads, or even Google search might be better for some groups than not. So it really depends on who the ICP is, the vertical, and then whatever is the channel and messaging. So cold calling works, but for very specific industries.
As a founder, I feel like it's easy to get caught working in the business and on the products and managing the team and the rest of it. How do you dedicate enough time to work on the business and kind of look at it from that high level founder perspective that I think is really important.
Yeah, it's very hard till this day. Like even I just shipped a product like a few days ago myself, whether it's like actually designing it, writing some code, and actually pushing it, testing it, etc. And I think I don't know if I'm ever going to change my mindset for being this in the weeds. I always love design. I always like product. I always like building. So I think I'm always going to be in the weeds from that sense. But it's almost like a consistent reminder of like there's a bigger picture to this. You have to think about the KPIs, the goals. How do we actually achieve Q4 and Q2? Because you need to plan ahead of time. But all this comes back to you have to have the right people in the right places. Like this only happens, and it gives you breathing room if you have the right PM to actually work on product, the right designer to work on design, the right salesperson to work on sales. If you don't have the right person, you're always going to find yourself so in the weeds, actually doing the thing because you either think you can do it better, you don't trust the person, they're just not performing to the way that you wanted. I think to me, like we have an amazing team that actually does this now. I can't stop myself on weekends to like go in Figma and design things or whatever it is. And then sometimes like there is something that you want to do that you don't want to distract the team with, but it could add some incremental value that you have extra capacity to do yourself. But over time, as you build the right people, right team, you'll find that you get breathing room to think about the bigger picture. Early on, it's easy to balance because you're building and the business is so small. You don't actually need to step out and think of it. You can think on the fly. But now it's like, yes, you do need to let the people run, let the people self-drive different areas of the business, but it has to be the right people.
Talking about that team and that talent, it's been like a hot topic that I know we've talked a lot about is keeping people in Canada and enabling talented people to find good startups to work for, or good companies to work for in Canada. What do you think Canada needs to do more of to keep more talented team members in Canada long term?
For sure. I think it's like we reverse engineers, like why do they even leave Canada? Typically,
compensation, sun.
Exactly. So even if they go to New York, right? Like the weather is not great. The weather is almost a replica of Toronto. So it's like, why do they go to New York, right? And you kind of look at it as like the company they work for is more ambitious, salaries are higher, autonomy, trust, and it's just you get to do a lot more generally in comparison to what you do here. The other piece is the talent density that's around you. Like you walk into WeWork there, you find probably like 200 other founders working on very ambitious things. Sometimes you walk into WeWork here, but it's like a corporate company who like has the office of the WeWork. You don't find that idea density that you find in New York and the talent. But I think in the last 2-3 years, it has changed a lot where there's a lot more push for it, but also the entrepreneurs are actually staying here instead of actually moving to the US to build a company there or in Europe or Asia or whatever it is. So now it's starting to concentrate even on this street, right? Alone, like now we have hundreds of startups that are just on Spadina here where it didn't exist a few years ago. So generally, like, one, you need to actually solve a very hard problem with some ambition that actually excites many, many hundreds and thousands of employees to actually solve that problem. Two is you actually need to build a culture to give them the autonomy to actually solve hard problems at the same time versus you're just optimizing from 99.8% to 0.9%. And then compensation is a big part of it too. Is like one is how do you give them equity into the business to have huge upside as the business grow, but also on the salary side is you need to compete against US players who are one hiring remotely in Canada, but also two are offering Canadians to actually move to the US. So that bar needs to be high too to incentivize the whole package. And then three is just like actually making them enjoy the day-to-day, right? So creating a good culture, having a good office, making them enjoy what they're actually building and solving. So I think it's not just one thing. You could pay all the money you want, but if they're not excited about what they're solving, and that's what we actually see is a lot of the US companies try to solve it with just high salaries, but it's not an exciting problem. They're just like one of 10,000 employees or whatever it is. So you'll find them actually end up working at an early stage startup to excite themselves. But you have to solve a lot of it. And then obviously like the environment and the city itself needs to push in that direction as well, not just the company.
Do you think policy, like federally, provincially, municipally, has a role to play in keeping Canadians here? And if so, like, what would you like to see implemented?
For sure. I think it's like, how do you make founders more excited to be building here and make it easier for them, first of all? And then after it being easy to start a company, what are different mechanisms that they could use to accelerate things? It's now, how do you incentivize them to not leave to another country, right? So even like Shred is some program that actually some Canadians hire a lot of Canadian employees because of it. So there are some programs that do incentivize and are going in the right direction, but how do you create the right incentives, the right motivations, and the right structures for founders to stay, but also why do they hire in Canada? How do you create that wealth for a lot of different people? How do you want the employees that work for these companies to actually stay here too? So it's not just solving for the founder, it's solving for the entire company. So it goes across the whole gamut of things that we will need to change.
Not to date the show, but Anthropic released Fable 5 earlier last week, and obviously it was out for 2 or 3 days, and then the U.S. government decided to take it down. And a lot of the policymakers in Canada, we're hearing a lot about sovereign AI across the country and having things built in Canada for Canadians. How important is that moving forward over the next couple of years?
Yeah, well, I think we've seen even Cohere talk about it when it happened as well. I think it's obviously very important. Depends on how you want to solve it and how you want to carry it throughout too. And then what obviously power you want to give the labs themselves versus the country or the government. But I think it's quite important to make sure, one, there has to be some guardrails at some point, and obviously you need to constrain it in certain ways, but is it the government, is it on the company? I think it's hard to even say what the right answer is. We're seeing it evolve in real time. I think the best part is you're seeing different countries have different things. Yeah. It's almost like an A/B test across different countries, and hopefully Canada obviously adopts the best way. But you kind of see it like play out. I'm sure like there's going to be some positive and negative whichever way you go. But it's about how quickly can we change, how quickly can we modify things, and how do we make sure it's the best outcome for the company and the people as well.
Well, let's look ahead to the future. Let's look ahead and think about like Canada's opportunity, what we can do with AI, what we can do with other tools. Where do you think Canada could be in 5 years if they take AI seriously, if they take kind of creating this economy, this future seriously, versus what that like bear case might look like if they don't?
I think we have some of the smartest researchers and talent pool across the globe, right? I think actually a lot of the Canadians are the ones who went to the US and work at some of these labs or even just not even labs like Tesla and other companies that some of the heads of or some of the researchers are from Montreal, from Toronto. So how do you actually keep them here, and then how do you actually build the companies here? So it goes back to why should founders actually stay in the country? Why should employees even stay here, or people who want to work for great, ambitious companies? How do you keep them in Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, the tech hubs? But then how do you spread that across the board as well? So the government needs to play a huge role in that, and we need to have support from that sense.
What should that look like? What should they do?
I think it's a hard problem to solve from that way. So,
horribly hard.
Yeah.
There's no one good answer. I'm curious what you take.
I think for me, it actually goes, I don't think it's just the government is going to need to solve it. It comes from the founders too, right? It goes back to like, why should they even stay here? Why should they build? Why should they hire here? Versus what's the benefit of them actually doing this in the US instead? So it goes back to that versus the government has to put in something in place, and this is all going to get solved. So I think you have to solve it from different equations, but you have to incentivize people to actually stay here and want to stay here. And what's the benefit for actually people to work at those companies? But I think this is just outside of AI too. It's just that is the hot topic, that is the thing to solve, but we need to solve it across different verticals too, and the companies are going to be created across those verticals, not just a singular one. So yes, we need to solve it with AI, but we need to solve it across the board to just keep entrepreneurship here.
Well, it's a broader problem, and that's why I think your perspective is really interesting, because you're someone who wanted to build in Canada. Like your purpose was, how can I build and solve a problem that exists in this country where it is like fundamentally known as being a different place to build and solve this issue. Like I think we almost need more people who are stepping up to the plate to try to solve something in this space, in this country, and try to see that vision of what I want Canada to look like in the future. How can I be a part of that process? Yeah.
How do we incentivize the young founders? Like we're seeing, obviously AI is enabling people to be entrepreneurs at a rate that is unlike what we've ever seen before. How do we continue to incentivize the young people that are coming up?
Yeah, I think it even goes back to even before they even get to that point. It goes even to schools, right? What are the schools doing? What programs are they in? How do they push from that sense? What incentives do they have? And obviously, what support do they have to actually try out ideas? Like when I was in school, there were some clubs that actually I was part of that kind of embedded that entrepreneurship thing in your brain, and you actually try different ideas, case competitions, pitch competitions, or whatever it is. So it actually goes back to how early can you get to them to kind of convince them to actually do that thing or test out that idea. So as early as possible, you could do this in that country. They're more likely to actually stay versus they go work for a US company, they go understand like what it's like to build in Europe or whatever it is. It's much harder to pull them back to actually come now try it in Canada. So how do you even go back as early as possible to even before they even want to leave, to get embedded in their brain that they could actually solve a big problem here? And it goes back to now, how do I build? How do I make it easy? Well, what things or what solutions can I go to actually do it? But it goes back to like how early can you get it embedded in their brain before they even think about moving?
It's really interesting because I feel like it's really kind of like a cultural shift, right? Even if we take this back to, we were talking about like consumer banking, business banking, and like how there has to be this shift in how people think and take risk. And it's not that I think Canada isn't a culture of risk takers. I think we have to get back to being one or more of a culture of where risk taking is more incentivized, more rewarded, and almost more normalized. And honestly, like we're seeing this too, and I feel like you can talk about this more, is when we talk to companies and we're like thinking about helping them implement AI, I feel like there's this narrative that exists that you lay people off and then you make up the work that they did with AI. And it's no, what if we were just more ambitious? Exactly. What if we set higher targets, higher goals, and try to do better?
Yeah. Even like we were talking about this the other week, some people are saying, oh, AI is going to replace, let's say, SDRs or whatever it is. But then you realize if you actually make the SDRs more powerful and more efficient, like you actually need more because they're more powerful and more efficient. You don't actually need to replace them. Same with engineers, right? I think people are using this as an excuse for like early 2021 to 2023 where they got too bloated and they overhired or over-engineered their company and added too many layers and too many middle managers or whatever it is, and now are doing the layoffs and using AI as a cover-up or as part of the excuse. But I think to me, it's like, if you actually use it right, you can actually empower the team to be a lot more powerful, more efficient, push out more. And then how do you actually use it in the right way? It doesn't actually always mean layoffs, right? So I think the messaging is a bit skewed in a negative direction, but I think part of it is like actually mistakes companies have done post-COVID where there was a ZERP era and everything was free and you're over-hiring. So I think there's different angles to it and people are kind of mixing the two together.
I completely agree. And I feel like that messaging angle is something that we talk about a lot, which is there's this narrative that because companies are kind of laying people off and they're citing AI as the reason, even though that likely we've talked to probably like 10 people about this and every single one of them has argued that that's not the reason why. It's not AI. They've overhired. They're a company that shouldn't have this many employees. What we're seeing still is like same kind of fear-mongering, realistic concerns brought up. How do you think you shift the messaging to be more aligned with what's actually happening, right? I guess to simplify this, like you mentioned the messaging is challenging right now. What do you think needs to change with messaging around AI?
I think even if you look at it like objectively at every other startup now, they're hiring a lot of people if they're growing. I think people say obviously AI is going to replace people. You don't need to hire as many, but you see Series B, Series C, Series A companies, they raise X amount of millions of dollars and then they're hiring hundreds of employees. If AI was actually replacing and is solving all these problems, they wouldn't have been hiring hundreds of employees. So I think we're not near there yet. It's just you could do a lot more now with this structure and the team that you have. Like maybe do you need 1,000 in 1 year? Maybe you need only 400. So I think the number of roles that are open have condensed a little bit, but I don't think it replaces fully the people. I think you could do a lot more with less people. I think when you look at layoffs, it's almost always very large companies. Like there's no small company that's growing fast that is actually laying off people because of AI. They're adding more people, empowering them with AI to actually grow much faster. But they are more efficient. They didn't need to hire the 500 people in X department. They might be hiring only a few hundred, but they are hiring as they're growing versus before, or what you see in the news is they're laying off people because they were already bloated pre-AI. And then the bigger companies, it's much harder for them to now shift the mindset and the work of 50,000 employees or 75,000 employees. It's a pretty tough problem to solve. So it's actually sometimes much easier for them to say, let's actually rebuild, let's cut some different layers that we've overhired for and then rebuild from scratch versus it might take us 3-4 years to like re-engineer the entire company and the team. But anyone who's growing has been using AI to grow even faster with people joining the team nonstop.
I'm glad to hear that vision because I feel like it's aligned with ours, which is there's going to be like less massive 50,000 person companies and more 50, 100, 500 person companies that are able to work and operate like 5,000, 50,000 person companies. It's exciting.
It's a new age for entrepreneurship for sure. But with that being said, there's recently the college and university commencements where speakers have been mentioning AI, and the crowd of university grads is either booing or walking out completely. Is that the fault of the mainstream media and the narrative that they're pushing? Why is that happening, and what needs to change?
I think it depends about obviously the mindset of like that school, that student, that different commencement speech. I think for me, it's generally on the school to obviously push and empower people to use it in the right way, and the student, it's up to the students to make sure like the opportunity is there for them, whether it's to land that job, land that opportunity, and think about their future versus only rely on a singular person or fault someone, right? I think it is usually easier to blame someone than obviously take accountability yourself. But to me, it's usually on obviously the student. Like I'm thinking about myself when I was in school. What was it like to think about my career, my future, and how do I think about it? If I'm obviously like graduating now, I think it would have been a different story and I would have thought about it differently. But my mindset, I don't think would have changed of like, how do I actually achieve the thing that I wanted? So you have to just adapt with the times, and it's just different reality now. I do think there's obviously less opportunities now over time. Even when we put up roles that are more junior versus more senior, we see a lot more applicants because there's just less roles open on that side of things. But obviously we've seen the talent bar just much higher. Like the people who are coming to apply for roles, it's just like I wouldn't have probably even gotten a job back then if I applied now. It's just like the talent bar is also changing with the time. So people are obviously achieving more things much faster. Some people are even in the summers building companies. Actually, a lot more now are testing new things. And how does that change over time? It's just they need to adapt with what's coming.
I agree completely, and I think that's the other half of what we were talking about, which is if there's less large companies, there should be more smaller companies, and to make that happen, we need more people to be founders, more people to be entrepreneurs, and it's that same thing as if you're trying to get a job, if you're having a hard time finding a place to work, and you can't find a place in that specific industry, that specific role that you want, build something. Try to solve a problem. And if you are able to do that, then congrats, you've created a job for yourself. And if not, you'll be a much more attractive potential hire.
Exactly. And even the skill set changes too. Like what you need to bring to the table is a bit different now. You need to level up the skill set from what you need to bring from what it was 5 years ago. So the world's changing from what we need from people who join, but also the expectations higher. But I do think what we've seen is the bar has risen and a lot more better talent has been obviously coming to the table with much less experience. You think some of the people that obviously come apply would have 5 years experience, but you look at the resume, it's actually like 1 year experience. So the world is changing, the way people work is changing. We need to adapt on a daily basis. Whatever worked for us 2 weeks ago doesn't even work for us anymore, from how we even on the engineering side, how we review PRs or like how we design things. Everyone, even who has experience, need to adapt on a daily basis too.
But even that example of that 5-year experience candidate versus 1 year who comes in and says, hey, I've built this and I think we should implement it because I've been using or I've been researching your product or whatever, that candidate is probably going to be the choice, right? Sure. And that's where we're sitting right now with a lot of the people that we're talking to is go build something and bring it back to us and let's have a conversation about this. Like we're sitting in a position where there's so many people that want so many opportunities, especially in the AI space. And I'm sure you're seeing the same thing. It's like, show us the value on why you make the difference over someone else.
For sure. And the earlier you go to a company too, we index more for obviously potential versus experience, right? I think like it does change over time as the company grows. Some departments, some areas you do need the experience. But obviously early on, I think almost all startups will say this, they index for like slope versus experience, where you take the potential of someone who's hungry, wants to work hard, is more willing to change things in the way they think versus someone who's been doing it for 15, 20 years. Because sometimes they don't want to adapt, they don't want to change the way their ways. And early on, it's just so ambiguous. Like experience helps at some points, but just because you worked at X company for 10 years, it doesn't mean you can copy and paste the playbook at a company who's 3 months old. It's just the world changes so much that adaptability and just raw hunger and IQ matters a lot more early on versus obviously at later stages experience does matter.
With that being said, you probably want an experienced lawyer or accountant.
I think so. That's what I use. Some departments you need to index for experience, compliance, fraud, and all these things. But for example, like someone who wants to join on the product side, wants to join on the operations side, you don't need 10 years of being a PM at some of the large companies to actually work at an early stage company as a product. But you need the ambition. You need to have some taste. You need to want to question things. You need to want to learn a lot of things, talk to customers, and that kind of comes with almost anyone. Versus you need to actually have done this for 10 years.
Well, it's again, the message is just, if you want something, go get it.
Exactly.
Go do it, right? Like, it feels like the barriers are, it's interesting because you talked about how there's like less roles open, but it feels like the barrier to being qualified or being able to become qualified really quickly for those roles. Like you were saying, that person, 1 year experience, but they've done all of this, they've built all of this, they've tried to go out and solve problems. It feels like that bar is almost lower. It's, how can you just go out into the world and find a problem that you want to solve and attach yourself to it?
The bar is lower for sure, and then it becomes a problem of how do you want to differentiate yourself, because it's like education's much easier now, and all the information is at at your fingertips, right? So it's almost like you want to become an engineer, go you could go do it in obviously less time now. Obviously, like if someone has spent many years, like obviously they're going to have an edge over time. But if you want to join an early stage company, sometimes the obviously less experienced but more hungry, more adaptable new solution engineer might actually be better in some cases. So it really depends on the company, the structure, what we're trying to solve for. But generally over time, like it's like what you said, like a lawyer, etc. Obviously experience does matter.
Well, you mentioned like if the work that you're doing or the way that you're doing the work is changing every 2 weeks, you need someone who's able to adapt with those changes. You need someone who's adaptable, able to learn.
Like an entrepreneur.
I think like what we're coming back to is we need more entrepreneurs. We need more and more. What kind of AI are you guys using internally? I mean, you're talking about like things changing on a 2-week basis. How are you guys using automation? Obviously, you're building automation for the banking platform space. How are you approaching it internally?
I think almost every single team now uses it nonstop. Like the default is now, how do we solve this? How do we build this with AI when it comes to internal tooling, internal operations, and even just the workflows from just an idea to actually you guys seeing it in the app is how do we shorten that cycle as fast as possible? When someone has an idea on Monday, why is it not shipped by Friday, right? Where you used to take 3 months, can we shorten the cycle? Obviously, some things when it comes to money movement, infrastructure, and things like that, it's obviously harder to change and make the cycle that much faster. But when it comes to editing things, changing things around, it's much simpler now. But also when we design things to go to prototyping, more non-technical people have the power to actually do it now. Designers design differently now, where they actually go straight to prototype. They don't have to like do wireframing as much anymore. Now they can tinker around with the prototype directly themselves. So it does change how every team works. Operations, onboarding, compliance, and things like that. You could do a lot more scalably, much simpler. And then obviously the bar of how technical you can get is getting easier. But obviously there are some guardrails that we have given we're a fintech. And then obviously like some engineers need to be involved in some areas to actually make sure the solution is correct, and you have to audit the work. It's almost like you need to just be a better judger now versus like a better executioner, because now you can execute so fast. It's like, how do you judge that this work is good and the quality is good? And taste matters a lot more. Shipping the right product at the right time matters a lot more, because the input and the output is getting a lot simpler and a lot faster.
We're seeing this a lot too, where like the companies that we talk to and when we do trainings, it's less about like how do you go and build and more about like how do you think about what you're building? How do you like create the workflow? How do you kind of map it out, create a system, understand what that looks like in practice before you go implementing it? Like if the bar to building is lower than ever, you might as well just figure out how you can map out what that actually looks like.
And when you say using AI, like are people cloud coding in the office, or how are they using it?
So it depends on the team. Obviously, like cloud code is like the most popular thing now when it comes to technical implementations, when it comes to like engineering and things like that. But then a few weeks ago, OpenAI released a model, and then people are now using that and they're saying it's a bit better than Claude Code. And then Claude Code obviously released the model. And so it goes back and forth. I think it's more like how adaptable are you to the different systems versus like, this is my way. And I'm just going to get stuck to it for 6 months and then readapt. So on a bi-weekly basis or even a monthly basis, the actual flow changes and people adapt it to pretty fast. But even like on the design, we use different tools than Figma now. we are still using Figma in some cases, but now we're using different tools that pop up every few months just to test like what is it actually good at. And sometimes it's good at like 3D animations versus even prototyping versus wireframing or whatever. So we kind of make it, how do we fit this component or new component into the workflow? But like, yes, like cloud code, what is the most popular? It's typically cloud code.
And are you judging employees based on token usage?
No, we haven't gone to that point yet. I think I see the reverse now, where some people are putting caps, limits, reversing some of the KPIs they put on the teams. I interview people and they kind of tell me how the company is now reversing a lot of the things, because they can obviously gamify a lot of the things that you put in place, where if input is the thing that's being measured, you can obviously max it out and you look great, but what is the output? How good is the output is what matters. So for us, like the KPIs and how we measure people hasn't actually changed. Obviously, you need to now be more aggressive with targets. You need to do them faster, but the same KPIs always stayed the same.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we hear that too, where it's less about like how do you show the amount of tokens you're spending. It's more about how do you have that pain over top that shows what that spend has been allocated towards and what that impact is being driven. Curious your thoughts on like local models and open source as kind of the future of AI as token costs get more and more expensive.
Yeah, I think to me is like whatever model solves the right problem for us, we'll test it out. I think for us is like how do we actually think about team structure, and how do we think about workflows as well? Because if every single person on the team is using something differently and it's not working in the right way and they're not adapting to each other and the process is inefficient, then it's not going to work. But whatever makes the team as most efficient and collaborative is what matters now as you get bigger and bigger. Obviously, if you're working by yourself in a single person team, you can do whatever you want, whether you're using different models or different even IDEs or softwares that like doesn't even have collaboration or team management. Whatever works for you on your personal life or whatever, you can do whatever you want. But generally, as we think about a team, it's about a whole process holistically versus a singular person. What are they using? Because at the end of the day, you're working across collaborative teams, and that needs to actually work well. So to me, it's more about what solves the problem versus like we have a single preference.
Yeah, and I feel like we see that too, right? It's like how can you build like a unified system and then maintain flexibility to switch as like Claude becomes better, Codex becomes better, like you flip back and forth. But it's more about how do you have a system that can plug into each of those pieces and continue to run effectively.
Exactly. Like you see some people that were using Cursor a few weeks ago, they got bought. And then they're like, do we still want to use it? Do we not? Our Eng team over time, some of them were using Cursor. They actually switched to Codex. Then they switched to Cursor again when some things change. So just being able to adapt back and forth on what you like and what works for you, as long as the entire team is still moving in that direction.
I want to come back to what you were mentioning earlier on about that transition and into Canada and coming to Canada, watching your parents grow up business. What was that process like moving to Canada and seeing your parents shift into operating and working and living in the Canadian environment?
I think for me, the big difference was culture. So for us, we came from the Middle East, a lot more conservative. Entrepreneurship wasn't a huge thing. You couldn't just do whatever you want at any time. So I think the openness and the culture of actually achieving whatever dream you can actually do and want over time becomes a lot simpler. So I think that was a big shift. But even just like, as stupid as it sounds, like how people interact with each other, even how schools work, because I came in middle school going into high school. So even the systems, the education, how does that work? And then what does university look like? So that was the big shift for me. It was like, how do you adapt to the culture and how do you ingrain yourself there? But then it's almost like you have no ceiling. The opportunity is just there for you to go grab, right? So you want to be a lawyer, you want to be a doctor, it's right there. You want to go build a business, it's also right there. So for me, there was just, it's almost like you can achieve whatever you want. That was a pretty big surprise or a big shift, which is why we actually ended up moving here. But for them, they were doctors in the Middle East. When they come here, your license doesn't actually mean anything. So for them, they actually had to like redo schooling. Wow. So they, like my mom went to U of T again, redid residency. So for them, seeing them go through that, it actually like pushes you and motivates you a lot more to make sure you actually achieve something great, because they obviously went through that to get you here. So I think that helped a lot to push through what we've done here. And to see them do it at that age, it just motivates you to push harder now to achieve whatever you want. Because if they did it at that age and redid everything after 10, 15 years of being a doctor in the Middle East, then you could do whatever you want here.
And I think that's the culture that we want to be instilling here, which is like, you can do things. You can just go and solve problems. Yeah. Also, I think we should have more medical licenses allowed. Yeah. I don't think you should have to redo school, but that's just my opinion.
Different. Yeah. Maybe I'll bring them on to discuss that. Yeah.
Please.
Yeah, I mean, being conscious of time, I want to make sure that we have time to do a tour of the space, and I know that's something that we wanted to include for sure. Yeah, we do have a long-standing tradition on our podcast that we do at the end. So, would you like to share?
Yeah, if you had one question to give to the next guest without knowing who they are, what would that question be?
I feel like I like the question you asked me. Is like, what would you do if you weren't doing what you're doing? So I don't know if you were going to ask them that already. I don't know, maybe a question of what country would you recommend for the next person to visit? Yeah. Okay. Because I think usually I always default to Europe. So I was like, I need someone to recommend something for me next. So maybe, what country have they visited, or what country would they visit next?
I like it. Cool.